Caribbean Vibrations presents Self-Made Canadians, a two-part series celebrating the untold successes of Black entrepreneurs. We partner with 4 Black production teams and journalists to share the stories of Beverly Mascoll, Elijah McCoy, Robert Sutherland, and Lucie and Thornton Blackburn. Stay tuned for part 1 of this inspiring series right now on Caribbean Vibrations.
Imagine being born to humble beginnings in Colchester in 1844, to parents who were formerly enslaved before seeking refuge in Canada via the Underground Railroad, only to go on to be praised as the most prolific Black inventor of his time.
My name is Jason Miller, journalist and writer for the Toronto Star. Join me in a mission to learn more about Elijah McCoy, one of Canada's greatest Black inventors, hidden from our history books. This is Who's the Real McCoy on Caribbean Vibrations.
We start our search for details about Elijah McCoy here at the Toronto Railway Museum, where we hope to find information about a Canadian-born innovator whose inventions were broadly used and sought after by railway companies across North America in the late 1800s. Despite inventing devices that revolutionized the efficiency of the steam engines used in locomotives, we were unable to find any information about McCoy's contributions here at the museum. Our journey to learn more about Elijah McCoy has brought us here to the Toronto Film School for a chat with Andrew Moody, who brought Elijah's story to the big stage in his 2006 play, The Real McCoy.
I was doing a play written by Linda Griffiths, and I remember I was talking to an audience member. He said, I really like Linda Griffiths' work. And I said, yeah, she's the real McCoy. And he said, hey, do you know where that phrase came from? I lied. I was like, yeah, the Hatfield and the McCoys. Everybody knows that. The first thing I did when I got home that night is I went to Google. The phrase actually was inspired by an African-Canadian inventor who was born in the 19th century, and he was the son of runaway slaves. He was so clever that he was able to study in Edinburgh, Scotland. He was able to study engineering. And we didn't know who this Canadian inventor was. We had no idea who this Black man was born in Canada from runaway slaves. We just had no idea, and it's not taught in schools.
We also met with Dr. Rosemary Sadler, author, historian, and recipient of the Order of Ontario.
One of the realities of having a lack of Black history education is the continuation of anti-Black racism. Elijah had overstepped in the public perception what a Black man should be doing, especially a Black man at that time.
What he did was, he used his master engineering knowledge to create a lubricating cup that could keep a steam engine lubricated while it's running. That was revolutionary. Nobody had ever done that before. At that time, Adam Smith was inventing capitalism, It's hard to think about it now because, of course, trains, for us, are just a part of our world. But at the time, steam engine technology was brand new. It was revolutionary. And because a lot of people wanted to hide his contribution to steam engine technology, his contribution became hidden in the sands of time.
After learning more about the genius of this Canadian-born pioneer, I couldn't help but ask myself why McCoy's contributions remain missing from Canadian history books.
To truly understand more about McCoy's life and the impact he had on the world, I met with Irene Moore Davis, historian and curator at the Freedom Museum in Amherstburg, Ontario.
Elijah McCoy is considered an African-American inventor, one of the greatest African-American inventors. He was responsible not only for machinery that revolutionized the railway industry, but also the shipping industry, manufacturing. He invented Treadford tires. He invented a new kind of ironing board. He invented a new kind of lawn sprinkler. I mean, he was incredibly talented and prolific. Very few people realize that he was born here in Canada, that he is a product of the Underground Railroad, that he went through his schooling here in Canada prior to going to Scotland to become an engineer.
A key part of Elijah's story is his parents, who found refuge here in Canada. Tell me more about their story.
So Elijah McCoy's parents were both formerly enslaved individuals from Kentucky, George and Millie McCoy. George had actually been manumitted or freed by his enslaver, but Millie was still very much wanted as someone who had escaped from slavery. They made their way to Michigan. They eventually made their way to Colchester, Ontario. They raised 12 kids. Elijah was the third of those. And, you know, they had all of these skills that they had acquired during their years of enslavement that they were able to turn into a profitable business here in Canada.
You and I discussed Elijah McCoy and how he's been claimed as this African-American innovator and inventor, but not much is said about his Canadian roots. Why do you think that is?
You know, the Americans do a much better job of claiming their Black history and celebrating it than we do. In Canada, we've been kind of erased from the narrative in terms of our past achievements and contributions. In Canada, Elijah McCoy's name and legacy really aren't celebrated as they should be, and that's true of so many people of African descent who played major roles in creating this country, this society, and all of these wonderful innovations that we all have come to rely on. In Detroit and in Ypsilanti, Michigan, there's a lot of attention paid to Elijah McCoy. Those are both places where he ended up living, but he could not find work as an engineer.
So then he went to Ypsilanti, Michigan, and of course Michigan was the hotbed center in the world for steam engine technologies and trains. And as a Black person, even though he was trained as a master engineer, he couldn't work as a master engineer because this was America at a time when, you know, racism was at its most virulent. So he was able to get a job shoveling coal on a train.
He wasn't able to get work as an engineer when he returned due to racism, but he still pivoted from that and became this extremely talented and prolific inventor.
I'm sure one day he's shoveling coal going, this is ridiculous. I'm a master engineer, what the hell am I doing here? And he noticed that steam engines can be very inefficient. The thing about steam engines back in those days is that steam is very corrosive to metal. Steam engines would seize up, and it was hard to keep them lubricated so that they would continue to run.
There were young boys, grease monkeys, who were brought in order to lubricate and tend to the other parts of the train. But what would happen, and what Elijah was able to witness, is that impatient conductors or passengers would insist that the train get moving. And sometimes these young boys would get caught up in the mechanisms of the train and be killed.
He found that trains were having to be stopped all the time for people to manually oil the engine parts. That resulted in delays and a great risk of injury to workers. He created a much more efficient system that automatically lubricated the engine on an ongoing basis. The trains didn't have to stop. Efficiency was achieved. People were saved from harm.
He created this device, and it worked like gangbusters. And he patented it.
But because of his race, he wasn't actually able to profit extensively from the work that he did. He often had to sell off the rights to his inventions to other manufacturers who could proceed with getting them produced.
The manufacturer, however, cannot tell anybody that a Black man invented it, or else nobody would buy it. So they had to keep his identity secret. And other companies, realizing how popular these lubricating cups were, they decided to manufacture their own, but they were never as good.
Individuals wanted to make sure that they ordered his stuff and not the knockoffs.
His was always the one that people asked for. So when manufacturers were selling their lubricating cups, people would come in and ask for the real
McCoy.
And in the end, as he was aging, he was just not able to keep pace with the demands of sustaining his life. He ended up in an infirmary that was basically for very poor people and died without much money at all.
Here in Detroit, McCoy's legacy lives on, with buildings and streets bearing his name, a historical marker in front of his former home, and exhibits of his work in local museums.
He's got a patent office named after him. He's in the National Inventors Hall of Fame in Ohio. All of those things are sort of the ways that he's celebrated. We have to do a better job of claiming our own Black Canadian heroes and making sure that Canadians know about them.
Can I help you? I, Mr. Rankin's apprentice, Elijah McCoy. I'm here about the engineering position. Oh, you've got to be joking.
So what was kind of your objective for what would become your 2006 play, The Real McCoy?
I was interested in what the life of Elijah McCoy represented.
It was so important for Black people at that time who were contending with ideas of white supremacy and just general sense that people of African descent were not achievement-oriented, that we didn't have the intellect to excel in these fields. It was so important for people to see what he was doing and to be able to celebrate it and comment on it.
At one of the most racist times in American history, he strove for excellence. You can be victimized, but that doesn't make you a victim. So no matter what you're experiencing in life, no matter what circumstance you're in, you don't have to be a victim. If Elijah McCoy can do it in the 19th century, then we can do it today.
We need to be making sure that all of these incredible stories are reflected in our curriculum, in our media, in our popular understanding of how this country and this society came about. I'm really looking forward to the day when every school kid knows about Elijah McCoy.
McCoy's ingenuity, courage, and determination fueled his triumph over rampant racial discrimination. Against all odds, he created more than 57 patents throughout his lifetime. Historians say it's long overdue for us to reclaim heroes like McCoy who deserve a place in the Canadian history books.
Transportation has long been the lifeline of urban life, evolving to meet the demands of growing cities. But where did it all begin? I'm Kayla Thompson, and today we're taking a journey through history to discover the origins of taxi services in Toronto and the trailblazers who shaped this part of our city's history.
So where do you have to go, ma'am?
Can you take me to Church Street west of the St. James Cathedral?
Oh, okay.
Today, the spot on Church Street is a hub of modern urban life, but in the 18th century, it held a deeper historical significance. This was the location of Toronto's very first taxicab business, invented and operated by the Blackburns. Our story begins in 1812 with the birth of Thornton Blackburn. Born into slavery in Kentucky, Thornton worked as a skilled horseman and porter. At 19 years old, he met Ruthie, a 28-year-old enslaved nursemaid. The couple fell in love, and in 1831, they married with the permission of their enslavers. However, historian and author Carolyn Smarts Frost explains their happiness was short-lived.
What sparked the Blackburns' escape from Louisville, I believe anyway, was the sale of Mrs. Blackburn, and a fancy girl is just what you think it is. A beautiful woman like Mrs. Blackburn was worth like a great deal more as a sex slave, and that's what she would have been, than she was as a field worker or household worker in any part of the South.
Faced with separation, the Blackburns made a daring choice: escape. On July 3rd, 1831, with forged papers declaring them freed slaves, they boarded the steamboat Versailles and traveled north to Detroit. The Blackburns believed they had found freedom, but 2 years later, their past caught up with them, shares Nikki Clark. Arrested under the Fugitive Slave Act, they faced re-enslavement.
The Detroit riots, well, as they were fleeing from Kentucky, they by way of Detroit, they wanted to kind of go incognito and to blend in. However, they were discovered. Information was brought back to the slave masters that they were walking around appearing to be free. So they were about to be extradited back to Kentucky, but that didn't happen. The Detroit Black members and those who were abolitionists wanted to stop that from happening. Thus, the Blackburn riots ensued.
But the uproar didn't stop there. While Detroit was engaged in protesting, a few friends of the Blackburn devised a dramatic escape, and the couple fled to Upper Canada. But the threat of re-enslavement still loomed until the Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada intervened.
He said, "We cannot return an accused criminal to a jurisdiction where the punishment for the crime of which they're accused is harsher than Canadian law will allow, and to this day, our extradition laws are founded and based on the spirit of that premise. We don't always get it right, but the Blackburn case set a precedent in 1833 that we still benefit from to this day."
To mark their new beginning, Ruthie changed her name to Lucie, and the couple settled in Toronto, where Thornton reunited with his brother Alfred, and together they built a new life. It was around this time that Thornton came up with an idea that would pave the way for modern transportation. Working at Osgoode Hall, Thornton overheard whispers of a new invention, shares Charmaine Lurch.
Thornton sends to Montreal for the new Hackney cab that has just arrived there, and he wanted that same new form of carriage in the city of Toronto.
In 1837, the Blackburns pioneered Toronto's first taxicab, a yellow and red-trimmed horse-drawn carriage called the City. This cab is reinterpreted in Lurch's mobile invisible carriage artwork.
And from the blueprints, I created an 11 by 11 foot floor sculpture.
Despite owning only one cab, the Blackburns' business laid the groundwork for public transit in Canada. In 1849, Burt Williams created Canada's first six-person omnibus carriage. This is widely seen as the origin of public transit. By 1862, horse-drawn streetcars replaced the omnibus, and in 1891, the transition to electric transit began. This culminated in Canada's first TTC subway system in 1954. While these advancements modernized transportation, they posed challenges for taxi entrepreneurs. This is a trend that continued into the ride-sharing era. Emmanuel, a 15-year veteran of the taxi industry, tells us that the business the Blackburn helped pave the way for is now at risk. Have you ever been a part of any anti-Uber protests?
Yeah, I think initially when Uber was introduced as rideshare, we all believed that it was just going to be like friends and family just sharing or car or maybe carpooling. Right. But the moment it became evident that they were going to start taking the business out of the cab industry was when, there was high alert in the cab industry that we need to do something about this. So I think the initial reaction or natural reaction was to just, bring this attention to the city officials that, business is being threatened here. Yeah. So that's when the taxi brokerages and the independent taxi drivers and all the other industry that's related to the taxi business.
Uber's 2014 launch, along with its controversial UberX platform, disrupted the industry. This sparked protests in Toronto from taxi drivers demanding fairer regulations. Beck Taxi was one of these companies. Nearly 200 years later, the Blackburn's City Cab is still echoed in Toronto's TTC color scheme. But the couple is not widely recognized by the public, Charmaine Lurch tells us. She keeps their story alive through art education.
First of all, if you say Thornton Lucie Blackburn started the first taxi business, had houses in Toronto, you see their surprise if you say, this black couple, no one is imagining in their heads that it's a black couple. Right. And so it's wonderful to be able to bring that whole story forward. So people are very interested in that.
But it wasn't until the 1985 excavation of the Blackburn's former home located here at Toronto's Inglenook School that their story gained widespread recognition. This pivotal archaeological dig, led by Dr. Carolyn Smarts-Frost, inspired her 2007 book, I've Got a Home in Gloryland, which shed light on the couple's significant contributions to the transportation industry, the Underground Railroad, and their community involvement, solidifying their legacy as historical figures.
In 1985, I was looking, as an archaeologist working for the Toronto School Board, for an archaeological site which would engage the attention of the very multicultural population of the Toronto schools. We discovered that the oldest school building the school board owned, which was then Sackville Street School, today is Inglenook School, had once belonged, the property on which it stood had once belonged to a man by the name of Thornton Blackburn and his wife, Lucie. That property was open for excavation. We ran an archaeological dig there in the summer of 1985, 40 years ago this year. And we discovered the remains of the Blackburns' home, their barn, root cellar, and a midden, a place where they burned and buried their garbage out back, which is one of archaeology's great treasure troves. And we excavated the Blackburn site as the first underground railroad site ever dug in Canada.
From this dig, historians uncovered a remarkable truth. Thornton Blackburn took the Underground Railroad in reverse, risking everything to return to Kentucky and free his mother, Sippy Blackburn, and others from enslavement. His daring journey was a testament to the Blackburns' unwavering commitment to family and freedom.
We don't have many examples of Black entrepreneurs, activists, business people, community builders, wealthy people from the 1800s in Toronto.
The Blackburns owned 6 houses in the poorer part of Toronto where they leased them out for $10 a year to family after family after family of people who had fled slavery.
They helped them with finding homes and also finding them work through the own company that they set up called The City, which was the first taxi cab company in Toronto. So that is just quite ingenious because the couple, they actually didn't know how to read or write. So it was just hard work, determination, and just, intrinsic brilliance.
Here we are on site at Toronto Necropolis, where Thornton Blackburn's tombstone lays. Thornton Blackburn died on February 26, 1890, and his wife Lucie joined him 5 years later in 1895 on February 6. Together, they left an undeniable mark as the founders of Toronto's first taxi company, rising to prominence as one of the city's most successful Black families. Thank you for joining us through a journey of self-made Canadians. I'm Kayla Thompson, and you're watching Caribbean Vibrations TV.
Picture this. You're a young woman who's just arrived in Canada from Jamaica, Grenada, or Barbados. You settle in Toronto, and you're starting to get the lay of the land. Where do you go for groceries? Or to get the latest records? Or to get your hair products? In these days, there was one woman who had the how-to guide on getting your hair done and more, and her name was Beverly Mascoll. Today, we'll share the story of the woman entrepreneur and community connector who revolutionized the business of Black beauty in Canada.
Beverly Mascoll was an exciting woman. I mean, she was fine. She was fine. And I think we loved Beverly Mascoll because she made Black women feel good, look good. You didn't have to have pink cheeks, pink. We didn't have to keep going to Buffalo and Detroit and everywhere, to get pantyhose, so we didn't all look like Lena Horne. You know what I'm saying? It was like that, right?
Well, Bev worked at Toronto Barber and Beauty Supply. And I worked at a salon. It was the only Black salon in time. Then we were doing press and curl all the time and whatnot. And so we used to buy products from Beverly. And then every Friday she would come in and do the books for the salon. And that's when we started knowing each other better. As things would happen, she would see beyond it and what should be doing and what we needed and whatnot, what people were asking for. She always went to all the different shows in the States. We would go to Atlanta once a year to the Black show there. Always go to New York to the show in New York. And we were the first Black company to be involved with the convention that they have here for hairdressers.
Today, we'll share the story of the woman entrepreneur and community connector who revolutionized the business of Black beauty in Canada. Beverly Ashe was born on October 29, 1942, in Fall River, Nova Scotia. The only daughter of Gwendolyn and Arthur Ashe, Beverly was descended from a line of Black Scotians. Her grandmother Martha was a cleaner, and little Beverly would often tag along with her on her cleaning jobs, learning important lessons about dedication and hard work.
I had a new business and a new baby, and that was really tough going because I'd set the baby on the front seat of my car and have my products in the back, and I would have the baby on one hand and products in the other. Kind of crazy when I look back on it now.
In her teens, Beverly and her family moved from Nova Scotia to Toronto.
And the beautiful thing about all this moment is she was a Scotia girl, right? And when you come from Scotia to Toronto, you know, Toronto is the center of the universe. Everything bigger. You know, oh God, you second cousin. So you always have to give respect to the resilience of people who come into this space and carve out their own space. Hey, right?
After graduating from Central Tech High School, Beverly got her first job as a receptionist at Toronto Barber and Beauty Supply. With those same lessons she learned from her grandmother of dedication and hard work, Beverly eventually rose the ranks and became assistant to the president of the company, Nat Kaufman. Life flourished for Beverly. She married fellow Scotian Emerson Mascoll, a brilliant chemist with an entrepreneurial spirit, and they soon had a son named Eldon. Nowadays, thanks to things like free trade and online shopping, we have a wider selection of hair and beauty products at our fingertips than decades before. But in Toronto in the 1970s, that access was much harder to come by. Beverly was becoming known as the go-to source for all things hair and beauty, and that influence was about to grow even more.
Well, what happened, because she worked at the beauty supply, a lot of customers would come in, hairdressers would come in for shampoo and things like that, but there were no Black products. So people started asking her why they didn't carry the products. And as time went on, she spoke to Johnson Products in Chicago, and she started bringing in products in Ultra Sheen. And she would leave work and deliver like 1 jar of relaxer to Scarborough from downtown. And that's how her business started. And as it kept growing and growing.
Beverly Mascoll shares almost a similar story with Viola Desmond. They're two women who identified our identity issues of how we present ourselves in the society. They're both women who were very entrepreneurial, that they took the opportunity to think, I'm gonna start in my car. I gotta start somewhere. They weren't waiting for the eating center, right? But they thought, if I can start in my car, and I can go to hairdresser, beauty shop to beauty shop, I am creating a critical mass. That's how we call it now. They were creating a network. We call it now, right? But back then, they're driving around to make products accessible for us.
One thing Beverly couldn't see was representation of Black haircare products on the shelves of stores like Toronto Barber and Beauty Supply. Combining this lack with the abundance of Caribbean newcomers arriving in Toronto around the same time, Beverly had an idea to serve the underserved. And in 1970, Mascoll Beauty Supply Ltd was launched. The journey to entrepreneurship wasn't an easy one for Beverly, thanks to racism and sexism. Banks denied her business loans, stating that she would need her husband to sign for her. At the same time, they told her there was no market for Black beauty supply products. But none of this slowed Beverly down. With an investment of $700 of her own money, Beverly began Mascoll Beauty Supply Ltd and started paving her own way.
Well, when we first started going in, a lot of people would say, well, let's set it here so we can keep an eye on it. So that, as it started expanding and people started getting used to it, I remember one associate said, I don't believe that stuff's selling that fast. He said, so we put it where he could see it from the pharmacist, and he could not believe how fast the products were selling. And one of them named, but a major line was next to us, and I started easing into their space, which was not great. There were a lot of complaints about it and whatnot. And I actually, when I went on the road, I was the only Black sales rep that was on the road at the time. And people used to look at me, other sales reps, like, what company where are you from? What company are you from? As they got used to me, though, they were like, I was as busy, as they were, basically. But Bev and I would go to meetings at some of the head offices, and there were not only Black women, there were no women in most of the rooms. Most of the sales reps selling women's products were all men.
For the first 2 years of her business, Beverly was a traveling saleswoman. She and Emerson would travel to Buffalo and purchase Black haircare products to bring to Toronto and sell to stylists in the city. Now, for a bit of a history lesson. Though people from the Caribbean have been in Canada since the 18th century, the largest demographic of newcomers from the region arrived in Canada in the 1960s and 70s, when the country finally released some of its stringent and racist immigration laws. In fact, Canada saw the largest number of Caribbean newcomers in 1973 and 74, when over 40,000 people arrived in the country. Black media was also booming at this time in Toronto. Black newspapers like Contrast, which was founded by Alfred Hamilton and Olivia Grange Walker, and Share, which was founded by Arnold Auguste, expanded in the 1970s and provided vital outlets for the Black community to tell the stories that really mattered. If Contrast was ground zero for the Black community's struggles, then perhaps Mascoll Beauty Supply was ground zero for part of the Black community's survival. Beauty, or at least the idea of being presentable, has always been important, if not complicated, currency.
I admired her because even in her senior years, she thought that education was so important that she went back to York University and got her degree. Here's the thing. And what I also, too, admire about her is that she saw expansion. So it wasn't just one shop. She had more than that. She had outlets. So that means she employed a whole lot of people.
In 1993, Beverly received the Woman of Distinction Award from the YMCA of Metro Toronto and was the first Black woman appointed to the Order of Canada in 1998. Sadly, Beverly Mascoll died of breast cancer in 2001. The physical Mascoll Beauty Supply stores were sold, and while the business may have ended, her impact lives on. In 2021, Heritage Toronto unveiled a commemorative plaque for Beverly at 819 Bathurst Street, just outside of Bathurst subway station. And in 2023, the Nova Scotia Business Hall of Fame named her their laureate inductee. And while the business of Black beauty may have shifted in Canada since Beverly's time, her presence is still felt in the Black-owned businesses that exist today. As Beverly's colleagues would attest, she wouldn't at all be surprised with the impact of her work, as we've seen with the rise of Black-owned beauty supply stores across Canada. For instance, today we're in Just Incredible, on Eglinton West in the historic Little Jamaica neighborhood. And Just Incredible is celebrating 30 years in business. So that means for 30 years, Black folks have been able to come right here to get what they need for their braids, fades, and anything in between. And Beverly's legacy was twofold. She showed us the importance of having Black-owned beauty spaces. And on the distribution front, she showed us the importance of having Black hair care products in mainstream spaces. So the next time you visit a mainstream retailer and see Black hair care products on the shelves, or you patronize a Black-owned beauty supply store, think of Beverly Mascoll and say thank you. And thank you for joining me on this journey. My name is B. Kwame, and I'm a writer and media commentator. It's been an honor to be your host.
It's not uncommon for us in the Caribbean community to be told you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Anyone who has graduated from Queens, certainly in the last century, really we're standing on the shoulders of Robert Sutherland's contribution.
The overall impact of Robert Sutherland in Canadian history is one that's vast. It's something that we should celebrate more.
Robert Sutherland is a giant in Canadian history.
I'm Damien Sogren. Today, we feature a trailblazer who shattered glass ceilings in 19th century Canada, Robert Sutherland, a son of Jamaica and the first Black lawyer in British North America. Join us as we highlight the legacy of a man who not only made history, but ensured a brighter future for generations to come.
My name is Rosalie Griffith. I am the proud principal of Westview Centennial Secondary School here in Toronto. I started here in 1999 as a new teacher.
fell in love with the kids, fell in love with the community. And when I became an administrator and they pulled me out, I was determined to come back. And it's my goal to stay here now until I finish my educational time in TDSP.
Thank you so much for letting us come to your artistic space. We really enjoy being here, and thank you so much for talking about Robert Sutherland, the great Robert Sutherland, with us, a topic that's very near and dear to your heart, right?
Yes, it is. And thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have people come to our school. We're very proud of it.
And I want to take things back a little bit to Robert Sutherland, a young Robert Sutherland coming from colonial Jamaica in an era of colonial Canada.
When I think about Robert Sutherland coming from a colonial space into a colonial space, being born into slavery, slavery was abolished during his lifetime. To be in that position and to have the privilege through his father, who was the white slave master, having that opportunity to go into a university, he would, undoubtedly have faced incredible racism and prejudice. Just his presence would be remarkable.
My name is Greg Frankson, and I am a spoken word artist, a community advocate, and a subject matter expert on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Robert Sutherland has a really remarkable history. We know that he came from Jamaica, that he immigrated here. He was the 60th student in the history of Queens College. He won 14 academic prizes during his time as a student on campus, including one for general merit that was voted upon by his peers. So in order for him to have won that kind of award, he must have been well liked by other students at the college. He graduated in 1852 and relocated to Toronto, where he then was able to study to become a lawyer.
After his tenure at Queen's University, Sutherland then studied law at Osgoode Hall in Toronto and was called to the bar in 1855, becoming Canada's first black lawyer. Sutherland opened law offices in Kitchener and later Walkerton, the latter of which he served for 20 years as a conveyancer and additionally served as the first black reeve in Bruce County.
He left his entire estate to Queen's College. And at that time, the university was facing financial ruin because a bank that they had invested their endowment in had basically gone bankrupt. So then that donation was used by the principal in order to start a broader fundraising campaign, which led to the saving of the university as an independent institution. And if that had failed, it would have been taken over by the University of Toronto, and there would be no Queens today.
The money that he left in his estate saved the university. So it is still standing under the name of Queen's University because of the contribution of Robert Sutherland. The iconic building, the picture that you get when you have a postcard of Queens is Grant Hall. And Grant Hall was built with that money also that Robert Sutherland had contributed. It was named after the principal at the time, and there's a plaque inside for Robert Sutherland. But every time you see a picture of Queens, every time you hear that someone has graduated from Queens, and as I said, the last century, all of that was possible because of Robert Sutherland.
He arrived at the university campus at a time of change. The college is brand new. When I look back at what Robert Sutherland did 120 years before I was a student at Queens, I could take heart from that. I could take motivation from that, and I could take inspiration from that. And so in my work as an anti-racism advocate before I became president, I became aware of Robert Sutherland's story. I was able to talk about his story to my fellow students and explain to them that the depth of the roots of blackness at Queens allows me to then build upon that foundation and work towards a better future, not just for myself, but for other students of color and other black students who are gonna come along after me. And so I feel that sense of pride that Robert Sutherland and I share so much in common, but I also am extremely grateful for the opportunity to have served as AMS president, because that let me be in the rooms to help make sure that those memorials of his legacy were able to happen.
Speaking of Queen's University, you recently got a chance to visit your alma mater, and not only that, you brought your students on a field trip to Queen's University. Yes. Tell me, how was that experience for both you and them?
We made a point to survey students each year to see which institutions they'd like to visit. Queen's was one of the universities they selected. So myself and another supervisor, we took the students up to do the tour, to see the university. Years ago, I took some students and the tour guide gave the tour, and at the end of it, I noticed there was no comment about Robert Sutherland. And so I asked the tour guide, did you recognize that, the most important building potentially, or certainly the flagship building of our institution was built with his money? And she didn't know anything about it. So I made a point to write to those that train the tour guides, and I said, you need to make sure that this is a part of the tour. So for me, it was a bit of a test. So when we finished our tour, I asked the 3 tour guides if they knew the connection, because we finished at Grant Hall, which is the iconic building of Queens, the one that has the clock tower. And I asked the tour guides if they knew the connection to Robert Sutherland. And I was really proud to see that they did. And they spoke to the students about that. When I think about the Robert Sutherland story and my part in it, we do always stand on the shoulders of others. Because a group after our work picked up where we left off, and they were able to get the building named Robert Sutherland Hall is now one of the buildings, Law Building, which is very appropriate.
The way that Black folks have been able to exist in Canada has been denied in so many different aspects of what we do. And we can continue to look to examples like Robert Sutherland in a whole variety of different spaces and places to demonstrate to Canadians broadly and to professionals who are working in those fields more specifically that what Black people are able to do and accomplish and bring to the table is powerful, it is professionally significant, and it is creating new ways of being and knowing, not just for Black Canadians, but for all Canadians.
If we look at what we have today, I think it's maybe about 3% of all the lawyers in the country or in Ontario are Black lawyers. There are definitely a lot of barriers to entry. My name is Dontel Sampson, and I am a lawyer in Osler's Emerging and High Growth Companies Group. Coming up and coming through, my academic journey at Queen's and then going to law school and coming to my professional life, I think sometimes it's difficult to stop and think about, who has made this path possible and who has sort of put in the work before I did to be able to walk this path. And, as Robert Sutherland is one of the first Black lawyers to have existed in the country, this is something for me to be here, whether he was thinking about it or not, is a direct, sort of direct reflection of the work that he did and the things that he did and, how he wanted to put together his career. I think one of the big things for me about carrying on that legacy is always going to be mentorship. Whenever I get the opportunity to sort of pass that on or to be that mentor for a young lawyer or a young Black law student or, a young student in their undergrad, whether they're, coming out of Queen's or whether they're fresh out of law school or anything like that, I think, being somebody that they can look at and say, oh, hey, there's Dontel. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad that he's doing that. Maybe I could do something like that as well.
All of these firsts that he did as a benefactor, as a lawyer, as a town reeve, as all of these things that he did, it really shows us what is possible and the contributions that we can also make to the Canadian story overall.
Well, I think Robert Sutherland's impact on Canadian history is multifaceted. It's about his experience at Queen's as a student and the landmark ability of folks to mark his student experience at Queen's. But most importantly, what it is that Robert Sutherland's bequest that allowed Queens to continue to exist, has contributed to one of Canada's premier universities, which contributes to this country's incredible post-secondary education system, which results in so many of us in this country being educated and able to contribute to the creation of a forward-looking, progressive, and fairer society.
Robert Sutherland's life reminds us that true trailblazers don't only break barriers, they build bridges. Thank you for joining us on our journey through history. I'm Damian Sogren, and you're watching Caribbean Vibrations.
Thanks for watching Caribbean Vibrations. Follow us on social media at Caribbean TV or visit our website, CaribbeanVibrationsTV.com. I'm your host and guide, Alan, and we'll see you next time on Caribbean Vibrations.